At one point, the baby elephant was trapped and in mortal danger. The entire herd was frightened and aggressive, and a group of rangers had to confront them if they wanted to save the little one. How did this situation unfold? There is an unalterable balance in nature, a cycle of birth, reproduction, and death, working in harmony, and this is something that has never been disturbed. Elephants are also part of this ecosystem, and as a herd, in their own survival, they work as a team and protect each other. Something similar to what the rangers do, who apart from protecting each other, must protect the animals, only and only if necessary, because in reality they cannot interfere in the natural process, and that is an enormous burden they must carry. Both the people who protect the animals and the elephants themselves are connected, as both groups coexist in the same ecosystem. South Africa, surrounded by infinite beauty and at the same time the constant feeling of being stalked by a predator. But even elephants, the giants of the savannah, know fear. They have seen creatures or enemies capable of destroying them, and so they choose to avoid predators, ensuring their own safety and that of their kind in the face of dangers far greater than their size. Stampedes, confrontations with other groups of elephants, poisonous snakes, an environment full of predators that even elephants have to fight against. Something similar happens in the work of rangers, but unlike elephants, rangers don't have massive bodies or the strength to overpower a lion. They are human beings who constantly have to risk their lives and decide when to intervene and when not to. Nature is cruel, and they have to understand that, and they can only intervene if the accident or damage is caused by people themselves, otherwise they are not allowed to intervene. But the question often arises, when is it right to go forward? When is it right to hold back? And the security that comes with those choices, the risks, is it really worth fighting for and risking their lives? They are cohesive groups who must confront problems and remain alert to every sound. The crack of a fallen tree that could signal an aggressive elephant, even the roar of a lion that can cut through the air, or worse, the subtle, ghostly and deceptive sound of a tiger. Once a tiger locks its gaze on one of them, it often means death. These men and women, chosen to watch over and protect this wild land, live under constant pressure, to decide whether to go forward or not, whether it's right or not, but also whether it's safe. They are like elephants, protectors by nature, but aware that the very nature they must preserve also has the power to destroy. A philosophy carried by the two rangers who had to weigh their morals, their fears and their allegiances to decide if it was right to risk their lives, if it was worth it, and what those actions could mean for them. Two rangers of the same age and with a common purpose, but with completely different philosophies. Adrian was an experienced young man with nearly 10 years of experience working in many areas. He was an expert driver and the one in charge of getting to the most important places due to his knowledge of the vast expanses of land. He rarely got into risky situations, preferring to respect nature's decisions and not to interfere. However, when he did intervene, he tried to be as cautious as possible, fearing not only for his life, but also for the grave mistake of disrupting the natural cycle or food chain. Despite his obvious fear, his sense of duty drove him to work alongside his team. He supported them and took them wherever they needed to go. His fear never paralyzed him. To him, nature was a beast, but it was also something to be admired, and he cherished it with all his heart. Meanwhile, Raoul was a rather daring ranger, often taking too many risks or getting involved in situations he shouldn't, like trying to help a deer escape from a lion. His had drawn heavy criticism from his colleagues, especially Adrian, who didn't agree with his behavior and often told him he would end up dead if he kept it up. He rarely worked with his team, preferring to face danger alone, without anyone's help, a trait commonly known as the need to do everything himself. Raoul felt the need to prove that he could handle any situation that came his way, even when the risks seemed imminent. He didn't fully understand Adrian's fear, and they often clashed. But as professionals, they had to deal with situations together. The elephants were calm at the moment. No predators, no threats, a peaceful scene, gathered around the waterhole, cooling off in a serene landscape they often roam, watching over their young. But suddenly, one of the young elephants slipped on the slippery edge of the waterhole. Baby elephants, even as newborns, are quite heavy, and this situation was particularly dangerous for one with limited motor skills. The entire herd realized what had happened, and without exception, they united to rescue the calf from its predicament. They worked together in an orderly fashion, stomping on the edge of the hole and trying to soften the mud with water from their trunks to create a path for the baby to escape. But the ground was too solid to give way, and their efforts only seemed to prolong the inevitable. Elephants are highly emotional creatures, and a mother dedicates her life to the care of her calf. Knowing this, letting the calf die wasn't an option. It would mean losing both baby and mother. With this in mind, the herd became increasingly desperate, moving in desperation and stirring the group into a state of agitation. From a distance, the rangers watched the elephants' collective effort, an admirable sight, witnessing their determination, but also a heavy burden, knowing there wasn't much they could do themselves. The ground around the hole was too hard, and the herd's desperation would only make matters worse if they panicked. They lamented the situation, something all rangers understand. Approaching the area was an almost certain death sentence, and the hole wasn't man-made, it was natural. But Raoul didn't seem to care. He was getting ready to go in and help. Adrian explained that this was impossible. Firstly, the elephants wouldn't allow them to act. Secondly, they'd have to help the calf without provoking the wrath of its protectors, who were already upset. Raoul didn't seem too worried about these obstacles and was prepared to intervene whether or not anyone followed him. He mentioned that he'd get an excavator to dig a path to free the calf. It wasn't a bad idea, as the machine could drive the herd back. Without hesitation, he quickly went to get it. It wasn't long before Raoul returned with the digger and began to approach the waterhole. But this action brought a new challenge. An external presence was now moving towards the elephants, and they felt threatened. When the elephants noticed the movement of the machine, they began to react. Being highly cooperative animals, instead of scattering, they grouped tightly together to block its advance. While the calf remained trapped and increasingly exhausted, the adult elephants became aggressive, swinging their trunks to throw dust at the machine and stamping the ground violently to scare away the young ranger as he continued to advance. But they couldn't get close because of the machine's overwhelming noise. Adrian and the rest of the rangers watched Raoul's unconscionable actions. Although his plan was technically sound, they knew how dangerous it was to take on an agitated herd without a structured plan. But under all the pressure, they could not stand still. One of their companions had already intervened, so they had no choice. They decided to help, aware of the danger. What did Adrian do when he saw his teammates about to enter the lion's den? He ordered them to get out of the vehicle. It sounded like madness, of course, but he insisted that they had to support Raoul. What was this man thinking? The original plan was for Raoul to use the digger to speed up the process, but with the herd becoming increasingly agitated, their lives were now in serious danger. And secondly, Raoul didn't seem to be making much progress. The young ranger was digging, but he wasn't managing to free the baby elephant. They needed a new plan, and Adrian's idea was even more dangerous than rushing in with a huge machine to rescue a trapped calf. His hands were shaking. What he was about to do was madness, but they had to act quickly because the situation was getting out of control. All the adult elephants were confused and frightened. Now, instead of simply moving to scare the machine away, they were closing in to push it, creating an even greater threat. They were on the verge of ramming the digger. The new strategy was to scare the adult elephants away, but no one had any idea how, except Adrian. Clutching the steering wheel tightly, he told his team to get into the waterhole and push the calf out while the excavator continued to clear a path to free it. Adrian planned to use the vehicle to scare the elephants, using the noise to drive them away. He had noticed that the elephants didn't come nearer because of the sound of the machine. Everyone followed his lead and waited for Adrian to start the engine. This task required extreme precision. He had to drive fast enough to avoid being knocked over, but not so fast that he lost control, all the while maneuvering skillfully to avoid collisions. This meant that Adrian had to put his life on the line to create a safe space for his teammates, and that's exactly what he did. With a burst of movement, he drove the jeep towards the elephants as if to crash into them, but not fast enough to force them to scatter completely. Raoul watched in awe at what was happening. Adrian kept the elephants at bay, circling around the area where the baby was trapped, preventing them from approaching. Meanwhile, the elephants moved nervously, some even rearing up, trying to intimidate the man who was risking his life. But the tension continued to build as the baby elephant let out loud cries and began to drown. Adrian's teammates arrived, and Raoul immediately understood what needed to be done. He took the lead and knew his job was to keep digging while his teammates helped push the calf out of the waterhole. Raoul kept digging while the others climbed down. Once down, they went to work, pushing the elephant gently to avoid causing further damage. Together, they began to apply force to free the baby, while Raoul continued to carve the path, making sure he dug with precision. The ground was hardened, and the exhausted animal barely responded to their efforts. Focused and determined, Raoul led his team, aware that every second counted. The elephants began to move fearlessly around the jeep, sidestepping it and closing in as the baby, overwhelmed by the pressure, cried out in fear. Adrian decided to move the vehicle closer, driving over the terrain and getting out with one foot on the accelerator, trying to shout at the elephants, using the sound of the engine to frighten them, while his team finished lifting the baby out. The elephants dodged the jeep and began to circle around to the other side. The rangers made a final push, while Raoul created a careful, straight slope to make it easier for his team to climb out. Meanwhile, Adrian floored the accelerator, creating a deafening noise that managed to keep the elephants at bay for a moment. As the elephants circled back, they saw the team making one last effort. With the combined strength of the rangers and the excavator, they managed to pull the baby elephant out of the waterhole. Once the calf was free, all the elephants calmed down and stopped their aggressive movements. Adrian sat on the ground, his heart pounding, while Raoul and the others climbed back into the vehicle. Things began to calm down. They were incredibly lucky not to have encountered any wild animals that might have disrupted their work. Addo Elephant National Park is a game reserve, which means predators are always a possibility. The park is home to over 700 elephants, as well as leopards, lions, buffalo, rhinos, and even hyenas. The situation de-escalated, and they miraculously managed to rescue the baby elephant from the pit. After all the effort, the exhausted and disoriented calf was embraced by the nearby herd. The rangers moved the jeep and excavator away after the incident, leaving both Raoul and Adrian shaken by what had happened. As the sun began to set, silence fell over the scene. Finally, the mother elephant was able to reunite with her calf and calm down after what they had just been through. The team were exhausted, but no doubt relieved. They slowly withdrew, leaving the elephants to regroup in peace. Although the risk had been immense, the cooperation and joint effort had made the rescue possible, and to see the herd reunited, calm and happy, was like a living testament to their collective efforts. Raoul and Adrian, still distant in some ways, shared a moment of mutual recognition, knowing that their teamwork had made the difference. They shook hands firmly as comrades, and as the dust began to settle, the mother elephant approached her calf and made a loud but tender sound. It carried a sense of peace that immediately attracted the young elephant's attention. When he heard the sound of his mother, he immediately realized who it was and ran towards her, stumbling and jumping back. The restless herd began to settle down. The danger had passed. From a distance, the two rangers watched as the mother gently stroked her calf with her trunk, making sure it was safe. For the two men, this was a spectacle. Though simple in its essence, it was an undeniable act of bonding. The elephants slowly regrouped, returning to the serene nature that defined them, while the two men, exhausted, quietly withdrew, leaving the animals to continue their journey. But just as they were about to leave, something extraordinary happened. The mother elephant raised her head, her gaze fixed on the rangers. The herd began to emit rumbles, a series of deep and resonant sounds. It wasn't a threat, but something far more extraordinary and awe-inspiring, a gesture of gratitude, a recognition in their own language, as sincere as the embrace of a loved one. Raoul and Adrian, although distant observers, felt an immense joy at witnessing this behavior. It was gratitude, a rare and profound expression in such situations. As the elephants began to disperse, the little calf suddenly approached them. Luckily for them, the calf now regarded them as his best friends. Although they weren't standing right next to him, they were some of the first faces he'd seen, and the calf was delighted, making small noises of appreciation. He tried to tug at them, as if inviting them to join him and his herd, where his mother was waiting from a distance. But the two men didn't move. Smiling, they gently patted the calf's head, a warm gesture of respect and affection, but one that made it clear they couldn't go with him. Nature was something they had to respect and not interfere with. The cycle of life was sacred, and by rescuing the calf from the waterhole, they had done enough. With a bittersweet expression on their faces, the three parted company. Adrian and Raoul climbed into their vehicles and drove off, while the calf returned to its mother to rejoin the herd and continue its journey in this beautiful cycle of life. Their paths would cross many times in the future in this magnificent park.